Subscribe and leave a comment saying I subscribed, and I will personally reply to your comment. When I was around 16, I spent New Year's Eve at my cousin's house while our parents went to a party in the city. The house was ancient, secluded, and downright eerie. You had to drive down a narrow, winding gravel road surrounded by thick woods to reach it. Rumors swirled at school that the place was haunted, and I vaguely recall it being mentioned in some local folklore. That evening, my cousin and I were in the den playing video games when we were startled by the loudest crash I've ever heard. We both froze. It took us a few minutes to muster up the courage to investigate. Slowly, we crept out of the room, down the dimly lit hallway, toward the sound. It seemed to have come from upstairs, so we headed up the creaky wooden staircase. As soon as we reached the landing, a bone-chilling draft hit us, so cold it made me shiver. The upstairs hallway stretched endlessly, with faded wallpaper and creaking floorboards, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. We followed the icy breeze, which led us toward the master bedroom at the end of the corridor. The door there was slightly ajar, swaying gently as if someone had just passed through. We both froze in place, scared. Eventually, my cousin stepped forward, but I was terrified and stayed rooted to the spot. He pushed the door open and disappeared into the dark room. For a few seconds, all was silent. Then, he let out a scream so horrifying it made my blood run cold. Without thinking, I sprinted into the room, fumbling to find the light switch. When the light flickered on, I saw him standing motionless, his face pale, and his eyes fixed on an empty corner of the room. Nearby, a massive antique painting had fallen from the wall, its glass shattered into countless pieces on the floor. I rushed over, putting my hand on his shoulder, and asked, "What happened? Are you okay?" "She told me to leave," he whispered, his voice trembling. Confused, I asked, "Who told you to leave?" "The woman in the corner." She was just standing there, staring at me. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to get out of that house. I grabbed his arm and said we needed to leave. But as we turned to go, my curiosity got the better of me. I crouched down to inspect the painting. Surely it had fallen because of a loose hook, I thought. But the wire on the back was completely intact, and the nail in the wall was still firmly embedded. There was no logical explanation for why it had fallen. I told my cousin to call his parents, and we waited outside on the porch until they came home. When they arrived, our dads went upstairs to check the room. They found the broken painting but dismissed it, saying we must have been messing around or roughhousing. My cousin never brought it up again. Here's the part that still gives me chills. I'm 37 now, and just recently, I was reminiscing with my mom about New Year's. When I mentioned that night, she paused and said, "I believe you." She then told me something I hadn't known. My aunt had confided in her a few days after that incident. She said she'd woken up in the middle of the night and seen a woman standing at the foot of her bed, whispering for her to leave the house. Hearing that sent shivers down my spine. New Year's Eve on Daytona Beach is a night unlike any other. Main Street, typically humming with the sounds of passing cars and ocean breezes, transforms into a sprawling pedestrian party. Bars throw their doors open wide, music spills into the street, and partygoers revel in the heady combination of drinks, fireworks, and the promise of a fresh start. On December 31st, 2016, the festivities were as lively as ever. Thousands of people thronged the closed-off street, clinking glasses, laughing, and sharing resolutions for the coming year. Among them was 32-year-old Robert Meseros and his fiancée, celebrating their last New Year's Eve as an engaged couple. For much of the night, Robert and his fiancée blended seamlessly into the boisterous crowd. They hopped between bars, shared drinks, and exchanged kisses under the neon glow of Daytona's iconic nightlife. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the throng grew thicker, and what had been a carefree celebration began to feel, at least to Robert, suffocating. According to later police reports, Meseros said he became startled by the presence of law enforcement in the area. Though police are a common sight during such large gatherings, ensuring safety amid the chaos, something about their presence appeared to trigger an unusual response in him. Feeling trapped and on edge, he reached for the pocket knife he carried. a blade he claimed was meant for utility, not harm. Whether it was the alcohol, the crowd, or sheer panic clouding his judgment, Meszaros decided the best way to move through the dense sea of revelers was to brandish the knife and carve out a path. Witnesses described a sudden burst of confusion and screams as people recoiled from the sight of the blade glinting in the glow of streetlights and fireworks. In his attempt to navigate the chaos, Meszaros managed to strike 3 people, including, most tragically, his fiancée. The first victim, a man in his late 20s, suffered a deep gash to his arm as he instinctively raised it to shield himself. A woman nearby, attempting to pull her friend out of the way, sustained a shallow but painful cut to her side. Finally, in the commotion, Meszaros' own fiancée, her arms outstretched in what witnesses believed was an attempt to calm him, was slashed across her upper arm. Pandemonium erupted. The crowd scattered as partygoers scrambled to avoid the commotion. Police, already stationed nearby, quickly subdued Meszaros, wresting the knife from his grip and pinning him to the ground. Officers moved swiftly to secure the scene and provide aid to the injured, who, thankfully, suffered wounds described as non-life-threatening. As the chaos subsided, the atmosphere on Main Street shifted. The celebratory energy drained away, replaced by murmurs of disbelief and flashes of blue and red lights. Many partygoers were unaware of the full scope of what had occurred, only that something had gone terribly wrong. Meszaros, visibly distraught, was taken into custody. When questioned by police, he claimed he had never intended to harm anyone. The knife, he insisted, was meant to clear a path for himself and his fiancée through the throng. Yet his actions, whether born of panic or poor judgment, had left 3 people injured and the promise of a bright new year tarnished. Charged with 3 counts of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, Meszaros faced the sobering reality of his actions as he spent the first hours of 2017 in a holding cell instead of ringing in the new year with his fiancée. For those injured, the incident became an unforgettable, if unfortunate, start to the year. The events of that night lingered in the memories of those who had come to Main Street looking for celebration and camaraderie. It was a stark reminder that even in moments of joy, the unexpected can happen, changing the course of the night and the year for everyone involved. The night was electric, the kind of energy you only feel on New Year's Eve. The air in Rio das Ostras was heavy with the smell of the ocean, mingled with the faint tang of gunpowder from the fireworks that had already started. Families and friends crowded the beach, their laughter and chatter blending with the crashing waves. I stood near the waterline, camera in hand, eager to capture the moment the fireworks display would usher in the new year. As midnight approached, the anticipation swelled. Children danced in the sand, sparklers in hand, while vendors weaved through the crowd, selling drinks and snacks. It was the kind of night where strangers smiled at one another, sharing the unspoken camaraderie of celebrating the end of one year and the beginning of another. The countdown began, and the crowd roared in unison.
Tres, dois, Feliz Ano Novo.
The first burst of color exploded in the sky, a brilliant flower of red and gold that illuminated the beach. Cheers erupted, and I focused my camera, capturing the faces lit up with awe. One firework after another shot up, each more dazzling than the last. The rhythm of the display seemed to match the pounding of my heart. Then something changed. It started with a single firework that didn't soar as high as the others. Instead of bursting into the sky, it veered sideways, hissing ominously before detonating near the edge of the crowd. The sharp crack of the explosion was louder than anything before, silencing the cheers. I lowered my camera, a sinking feeling in my gut. The next explosion came almost immediately, followed by another. The sky, which had been a canvas of controlled beauty, was now a chaotic battlefield. Fireworks shot in every direction, some arcing dangerously low. A particularly large one exploded on the ground, not far from where I stood. The force of it sent a shockwave through my chest, and the searing heat made me stumble back. Screams replaced the cheers as the crowd realized the danger. People pushed and scrambled. I saw a young mother clutching her child, trying to shield him with her body as they ran. A man beside me shouted something, his voice lost in the cacophony of explosions and terrified cries. I could smell burning, fabric, hair, maybe even skin. and the acrid scent made my stomach churn. One of the fireworks landed just meters away, spinning wildly on the sand before exploding. The force knocked me to the ground. My camera flew from my hands, and I felt the sting of sand and debris against my face. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented, my ears ringing. Around me, people were falling, tripping over one another in their frantic attempts to escape. The festive lights strung along the beach had gone dark, leaving only the lurid, unpredictable flashes of the fireworks to light the chaos. I ran. My legs felt leaden, but adrenaline pushed me forward. My only thought was to get away from the explosions. I passed a group of people huddled together, their faces streaked with blood and soot. One woman was cradling her arm, her skin blistered and raw. I wanted to stop, to help, but I didn't know what I could do. Another explosion behind me made the decision for me. I kept running. By the time I reached the edge of the crowd, I was gasping for air. The fireworks had finally stopped, but the damage was done. The beach was littered with debris and abandoned belongings. The wails of the injured pierced the night, mingling with the distant sirens of approaching ambulances. I collapsed onto the pavement, trembling. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely wipe the grit from my face. I watched as emergency responders arrived, their flashing lights painting the chaotic scene in red and blue. Medics moved swiftly, tending to burns and cuts, while firefighters doused the smoldering remains of the rogue fireworks. Someone handed me a bottle of water, and I realized it was one of the vendors. His cart was gone, likely trampled in the panic, but his face was calm as he offered comfort to those around him. In the hours that followed, the stories began to emerge. More than 10 people were taken to the hospital, though no one could say how severe their injuries were. Witnesses whispered about what might have gone wrong: faulty equipment, poor safety measures, but no one had answers. All I knew was that the joy and wonder of the night had been replaced with horror, a stark reminder of how quickly things can change. As dawn broke over Rio das Ostras, the beach was quiet. The revelers were gone, replaced by workers cleaning up the aftermath. I went searching, but unfortunately, I never found my camera.
If you would like to hear more stories and support this channel, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.